Welcome to Dream Science, where sleep meets mystery, and ancient truths echo beneath the surface of silence. Before we begin, take a moment to arrive. Feel your breath. Notice the space around you. Let the noise of the day fade behind your eyes. Now I have a question for you. What time is it right now, exactly where you are? Is it midnight? Or perhaps the edge of dawn is just beginning to glow? And where in the world are you listening from? A quiet apartment in the city? A small house surrounded by trees? Or somewhere far away, where stars speak their own language above your roof? Wherever you are, whatever time the clock speaks, this moment is yours. Tonight, we step into deep time. We walk into the age before memory, into the world of the other humans, those who ruled the earth 300,000 years before we opened our eyes. Let the past breathe again. Let your mind drift as the ancient ones whisper through the dust. You're watching Dream Science, and this is where sleep meets history. There are stories the earth remembers even when no voice remains to tell them. Beneath your feet, in layers of quiet soil untouched by sunlight for 100,000 years, lie the remnants of lives once lived. Eyes that blinked beneath the same moon you now know. Hands that reached outward, not toward stars with names, but toward mysteries only the body could feel. This is not a tale of kingdoms, no gold, no crown, no written word. This is a story of silence, a story of those who came before you. The other humans, not beasts, not myths, not half-formed echoes, but humans, full and present, who ruled in ways we no longer recognize. Close your eyes now. Let your breath slow. Let your chest rise and fall like the gentle lift of ancient winds. Across grasslands no longer mapped. We begin our descent. Not into myth, but into time. A long, slow falling into what came before remembering. Not thousands of years, but hundreds of thousands, into a world before cities, before language, before names, but after awareness, after thought, after becoming. We gave them names much later. Heidelbergensis, Naledi, Denisovan, Neanderthal, but those were never their names. They had no names, only presence, only gesture, only the flicker of mind across the surface of being. We imagine ourselves as the summit, but what if we are only one flicker in a long fire? What if there were many? What if the story was never linear? What if humanity was never a single path, but a braided river, flowing in many directions at once? They walked, that they gathered, they hunted and tended fire. They cradled infants, they buried the dead. Some may have dreamt, not with words, but with symbols carved into bone, not with prayers, but with reverence traced into the walls of caves, shapes spiraling inward, hands pressed against stone. We drift now toward the Rift Valley, the deep seam of earth in East Africa, where our story may have begun, not with a single birth, but with an unfolding. So many kinds of humans once lived, not one, but many. We came from a forest of selves, each one burning with a kind of knowing, each one looking outward at the same stars you know now, though they had no names to give them. Some of their bones are beneath the ground, some are inside you, traces of Neanderthal in your blood, fragments of Denisovan in the enamel of your teeth, the architecture of your thoughts built with ancient scaffolding. Others left no trace at all, not even a jaw, not even a tool, only silence. And yet they ruled in the quiet way of wind and water. They moved across mountains. They watched the skies. They followed the rhythms of beasts and fire. And then they were gone, not with a scream, not in war, but in stillness, in South Africa. Far beneath the ground, in a chamber of soft rock and tight turns, lie the bones of a people small and strange. Homo naledi, their limbs curled, their skulls tilted gently to the side, as if still resting. They were placed there. Someone took their dead and hid them in the dark, deliberately, carefully, again and again. Why, we do not know. But they did something no other creature had done. They honored their ending. Was it grief? Was it ceremony? Was it something deeper, something unspoken? We cannot say, but the gesture remains, and gestures outlive names. Now imagine this, a night, very long ago, cool air rising from a valley, a small fire, and around it, shadows. One hand reaches toward the flame, another hand lays down a stone. Someone hums, or breathes, or waits. No speech, only presence. On that moment, there is no history, no progress, no empire, only being. And that, too, was a kind of ruling. You float now along an ancient river, its banks overgrown with trees. You've never seen its current slow, its silence deep. A blade of obsidian rests in the mud beside you, a tooth from a vanished animal, a footprint fossilized in ash, barely visible beneath the water's shimmer. Nothing stirs, but everything is watching. The sky above is familiar, but emptier. No satellites, no signals, only stars, only the turning night. You are not alone. You never were. There were others, always others. Their lives are no longer told, but the earth holds them gently. Their stories are buried not in words, but in the shape of your hands, the tilt of your skull, the rhythm of your heartbeat in the quiet. Sleep now, as they once did, beneath stars, without fear, wrapped in the hush of a world still becoming. Let the stillness carry you further. The fire had no name, not then, but it burned just the same. A flicker in the dark, a rhythm of light on skin, a warmth drawn close to the chest of something still learning what it meant to be human. We think of fire as a tool, but to them it may have been something more, a presence, a companion, a mirror. It crackled and pulsed, drawing shadows across ancient faces, shaping the first kind of language, not made with words, but with silence, shared around a flame. And in that silence, something stirred. Not just warmth, not just light, but mind. The earliest minds were not yet filled with thoughts the way yours is now. They did not narrate the world in constant streams. They felt it. They moved through it. Their minds were open. Fields, not crowded cities of noise and memory. No symbols, no names. But there was awareness. Awareness without judgment. A gaze that saw without needing to define. It is hard now, in this age of ceaseless thought, to imagine such a mind. But it was real. It walked upright. It learned to shape stone. And somewhere, in that shaping, the first flickers of reflection may have sparked, not language, but recognition, the smoothness of a tool. After many days of sharpening, the echo of a footstep across a cave, the taste of cooked meat, the soft skull of a sleeping child, not ideas, but moments. Moments that began to collect. Fire did more than warm. It changed what could be eaten. It changed what could be seen. It extended the day, and with longer nights came longer silences. Silence, where thought began to take root. Perhaps it began with watching, with observing the glow on another's skin, the dance of sparks, the way light flickered in eyes, the way shadows moved. Perhaps that is where storytelling began, not in words, But in the act of looking, of being seen, we sit now beside that ancient fire, not with bodies, but with attention. You are here, listening, just as they once listened to the pop of wood, to the hush of wind through grass, to the breath of those nearby. You are returning to a kind of presence, the same presence they lived within, not the rush of modern time, but the slow, eternal now. In this now, the other humans live again, not as fossils, not as strangers, but as part of you. Their fingers chipped stone into blades, their palms cupped water, their backs carried children. They watched the moon and knew it would return. They didn't rule the earth, they belonged to it. For tens of thousands of years, this was the way of being. A world without maps, a world without boundaries, each group small, moving as the animals moved, learning the rhythms of the land. By heart, not with laws, not with gods, but with patterns. The cracking of ice before a thaw, the cry of a bird before the storm, the sound of the river growing thin before the dry season. This was their knowledge, passed from face to face, from gesture to gesture, from moment to moment. We call it instinct, but perhaps it was wisdom. Wisdom, without needing to explain itself. Now we drift toward Europe. The winds are colder here, the forests dense and dark, and through the trees, heavy footsteps mark the path of another kind of human. Broad, dash-chested, strong, Neanderthal. For many years, we thought of them as brutish. Dull, lesser. But the bones do not lie, and the bones tell a softer story. They crafted tools with care. They wore ornaments. They may have painted. They certainly buried their dead. Somewhere in a valley now lost to time, one of them may have stood watching the snow fall, and in that pause, they may have felt wonder, not like ours, but wonder nonetheless. They were not us, and yet some of them became part of us. We met them, we lived beside them, we loved them, we merged. Their DNA lives in your cells now, quiet as a forgotten song still echoing in the architecture of your sleep. They were the rulers of their world, not with iron or stone, but with memory. With fire, with hands, with grief. And when they disappeared, there was no one to speak their name, but the earth kept the memory in its bones. Somewhere tonight, on a hillside, untouched by cities, a stone blade still lies beneath the soil. It was shaped by a hand. 300,000 years ago, it was used, it was held, and then it was left. The rain fell over it. The moss grew around it, the moss grew around it, and the earth remembered. You do not know that hand, but it was part of your story. That hand fed a child. That hand carried a wound. That hand may have brushed the hair of a loved one before sleep. It is gone but not lost, because you are here, and in some small way, you carry them forward. The fire has dimmed now. Its embers soft, the night is full, the other humans are with you, still, not as ghosts, but as echoes moving gently through your breath, your bones, your dreams. Sleep in their memory, sleep in their memory, sleep in their peace. The wind still moves through the grasslands, the stars still wait above. There are places in the world where the ground holds more memory than the mind ever could. A riverbed long dry, a cliff face exposed by wind, a cave mouth yawning open like the beginning of a thought. Beneath these surfaces lies a history that no one remembers, but which never forgets. Soil does not speak, yet it listens, and in its layers, it keeps the shape of those who walked long before us. Every grain pressed gently around a footprint, every fossilized ribcage held in its final breath, every stone blade dulled by use. These are not artifacts of war or empire. They are moments, lives, the quiet reign of those whose names were never written. You feel the pull of deep time now, not like falling, but like being slowly drawn through water. Above, the modern world recedes, its lights, its noise, its maps. Below, the landscape begins to shift. You begin to see what they once saw: forests without borders, skies unmarred by flight, beasts larger than memory, oceans that whispered to no one. This was their domain, and they ruled it without knowing the word rule. Their wisdom was not in control. It was in relationship to weather, to land, to each other in what is now Spain. A cave lies hidden behind curtains of stone. Inside, handprints fan out across the walls in gentle arcs. Red ochre, charcoal, manganese, black. These pigments were gathered, ground, and mixed with care. A hand was pressed against stone, and another, and another. Some are small, perhaps children, some larger, all of them reaching. They were not decorations, they were declarations. I was here, we were here, not shouted, not inscribed, in marble. Just breathed into the wall by pigment and palm. Even without language, they understood presence, and maybe in some silent way, they understood memory. These people, these other humans, were not visitors to the land, they were part of it. They drank from its rivers, they sheltered in its caves, they read its signs in bark and bone and breeze, and the land responded. It offered and withheld it, nourished and demanded. This relationship was not one of dominance, it was a kind of knowing, not knowledge written in books, but knowledge felt in the soles of bare feet against warm earth, in the rhythm of seasons, in the patterns of migration and bloom. This was their science, not measured, but lived. Close your eyes for a moment. Feel your spine, your breath, the weight of your body resting still. Now imagine that same shape curled in the hollow of a tree, wrapped in animal skin, breathing against the cold air of a glacial plain, the same heart beating, the same lungs rising and falling, separated by hundreds of thousands of years, and yet somehow the same. The bodies change, but the pulse remains. That rhythm echoes still. You are not modern, you are ancient in disguise. In a Siberian cave, not long ago, a child's tooth was found. It belonged to someone we had never known before. A new kind of human, not Homo sapiens, not Neanderthal, something else. We called them Denisovans. But they were not new, they were old. They had ruled their own stretch of time, moved through their own forests, shared their own fires. They lived, they vanished, and the world went on. Their blood mingled with ours, their voices did not, but in your cells they remain. Unspoken, unnamed, tarried, without your knowing, sleeping in your genes like seeds under snow. What does it mean to be human when there were so many kinds of human? Some buried their dead, some carved stone, some painted, some wandered and left. No trace. We do not know what they believed, but we know they were capable of reverence, of care, of return, again and again. We find bodies placed gently in the earth, sometimes with tools, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with nothing but the curve of a spine, curled as if in rest. They understood endings and perhaps beginnings. Not every ruler builds monuments. Some rule only by touch, by memory, by the traces left in a cave wall, or the curve of a jawbone resting in dust. The other humans ruled like wind over stone, quietly, completely, then gone, but not erased. The earth still holds them in minerals, in DNA, in story, and now, in you. Let yourself rest in that thought, that you are not the first, that you are not alone in the long unfolding of this mind we call human. Sleep now, in the soil of memory. Sleep in the soft breath of those who came before. You do not need to remember them. The earth already does, and she will carry the story forward, wordless, endless, alive. Before the first word, there was breath, not shaped into syllables, not ordered into thought, just sound, a hum beside fire, a sigh at dusk, the soft exhale of sleep, the cry of a child met by the answering hush of a mother before speech. There was presence, and presence made sound. This was the beginning of language, not grammar, not names, but rhythm. The rhythm of bodies moving through space, the rhythm of wind moving through trees, the rhythm of knowing without needing to explain. The other human should the world long before they described it. They listened to the warning call of birds, the echo of hoofbeats across dry ground, the way thunder rolled across a valley hours before the storm arrived. This was their vocabulary, not of words, but of patterns. They spoke with hands, with eyes, with silence. Their voices, if they used them, may have carried meaning that lived in tone, in breath, in the pause between one sound and the next. Not like ours, but perhaps no less rich. Somewhere in the dark of a cave, a mother may have sung to a child, not with melody as we know it, but with a chant, slow, low, steady. Her voice shaping comfort, not from culture, but from instinct. The vibration of her body against the earth, the rhythm of her breath matching the rhythm of the child's heartbeat. That moment was not recorded, but it existed. And moments like that, millions of them, formed the web of early human life, the ruling of the world through nurture, through tone, through connection deeper than language. Language did not arrive like a thunderclap. It rose slowly, like mist across a lake. First came sound, then repetition, then association, then meaning. We find traces of this in the shape of ancient skulls, in the growing complexity of brain structures over time. Broca's area, the larynx, dropping, the evolution of the tongue's control. But long before these anatomical shifts, the will to connect was already present. They reached toward each other, not for dominance, not for survival, but for something softer, something sacred, to share what could not be held alone. Imagine now, in the shadow of a great boulder, a group gathered around embers. A child mimics the cry of a bird. An elder responds with a grunt. The group listens, laughter, maybe or the early shape of it. Sound becomes shared, shared becomes patterned, pattern becomes culture. Even in this primitive play, the seeds of language stir, not just information, but emotion, memory, desire. They were crafting more than survival. They were crafting meaning, and perhaps, once someone asked a question, not with a sentence, but with a gesture, with a look that lingered too long on the horizon, with a sound that carried upward, uncertain, why the fire burns, why the animal dies, why the stars return. These early questions, unformed, unspoken, still shaped the shape of being. They were the first sparks of curiosity, of imagination, of myth, and in myth, They ruled the world, not by bending it, but by seeing it and seeking their place within it. Let yourself drift into that kind of quiet, not the absence of sound, but the fullness of listening, the hush that follows thunder, the moment before rain, the stillness of a forest where something just moved. This was the space where early language was born. It rose from the land, from the sky, from the bones and breath of those who came before. We did not invent words. We inherited them from silence. The first names may have been sounds for places where water flows, where berries grow, where a body was buried, then perhaps for people, the one with the limp, the one with the laugh like wind in leaves, then feelings, pain, joy, fear, love. They did not say these things. They expressed them, and others understood. That was the beginning of speech, and the continuation of presence. The tongues of the other humans are gone, but in your own language, you carry fragments, in lullabies, in cries, in gasps, in sighs, not the words themselves, but the instinct to shape breath into meaning. That is the inheritance. Not the grammar, but the impulse to speak, to share, to sing, to name the world. Even as it changes beneath your feet, the fire fades now, the group curls into themselves, sleep returning, like fog, but the last voice murmurs something soft, almost too quiet to hear. Perhaps a word, perhaps just wind. Either way, it's enough. Sleep now, as they once did, not needing answers, only rhythm, only breath, only sound. The world holds you gently, and the story continues. Night in the ancient world was not empty. It breathed, it watched, it remembered. Before lamps, before lanterns, there was darkness, vast and full of presence. And in that darkness, the other humans did not fear. They listened. Shadows shifted across the forest floor, carried by branches, swaying in winds older than names. The stars were not distant lights, but companions, returning always to their places, silent and dependable. To live without artificial light was not to be blind, it was to see in other ways. To feel the world move by sound, by scent, by the pulse of life around you. And in that night, memory moved differently. The other humans did not see night as absence. They saw it as a different kind of presence, a time for telling without words, a time for sitting still, a time for looking inward, not into thought, but into being. Their world was not divided between day and nightus. Ours is not activity versus sleep, but light and shadow in balance. In the dark, the fire revealed more than it hid, a flicker on a face, the gleam of a polished stone, the slow blink of a mind watching something only it could see. This was the theatre of their thought, not built in marble, but sculpted in light and shadow. Imagine now a clearing beneath the stars, the embers of a fire no longer fed, the silhouettes of bodies lying still. A child awakens, eyes wide, watching the stars. She does not yet know the word sky, but she knows its weight. The constellations above her are different from the ones you know. Some have long since shifted, others are entirely forgotten, but to her they were familiar, points of rhythm, points of return. They told her nothing, and yet they told her everything. These humans, the ones before us, had no books, but they had patterns, not written, but memorized through repetition, through story passed from voice to voice, gesture to gesture, spark to spark, the turning of the seasons, the migration of birds, the bloom and fall of certain flowers, the return of certain stars, all remembered, all carried forward, without ink, without page, only the archive of the mind, kept sharp by need, and softened by wonder. We wonder now if they had myths, and the answer is likely yes, not in the form of gods seated on thrones, but in the wind that spoke before storms, in the cave that breathed in the cold, in the fire that always returned. Their myths were not inventions, they were recognitions, ways of seeing what was already there. They may have believed the sun was alive, or that animals were kin, or that death was not an ending, but a crossing. And who are we to say they were wrong? For them, meaning did not need proof. It lived in the rhythms of experience. If a rock always warmed in the sun, it was a friend. If a tree always bore fruit in the seventh moon, it was sacred. If a child was born during thunder, they were touched by the sky. Each event folded gently into memory, woven not as fact, but as belonging. That is how they ruled, not with iron or decree, but with knowing their place, not above the world, but within it. As night deepened, their minds opened, not racing, but drifting, not filled with urgency, but with presence. In that state, something began to evolve. Not just memory, not just instinct, but imagination, the ability to picture what was not there, to remember what had not happened, to feel the presence of things unseen, a stone that looked like a face, a shadow that resembled a hand, a sound in the forest that stirred a new kind of fear. They were beginning to dream, not just in sleep, but in waking life, and that, too, was a kind of ruling. Now return to yourself. Feel your breath. Feel your body held in stillness. Feel the hum of your own ancient blood moving quietly beneath your skin. Inside you, somewhere beneath the noise of thought, is a place that remembers ninth way they once knew it. Without fear, without hurry, without light, only shadow, only presence, only stars. Sleep now, beneath those same stars. Sleep in the memory of a world that never needed to be named. The fire may fade, but the darkness is not empty. It is full of listening, before the tongue shaped syllables, before mouths carved sound into meaning. There was still a way to speak, and they knew it well. The humans who came before did not need alphabets. They did not wait for grammar. They spoke through eyes, through the movement of fingers, through the silence between gestures, through the rhythm of breath shared beside the fire. A hand pressed to a chest, a glance toward the horizon, a soft exhale that lingered just a moment too long. This was not noise. This was communication as real and deep as anything. Spoken aloud, their words were not stored on walls. They were passed hand to hand, borne on the wind, held in the creases of smiles, in the way one body leaned toward another when danger came. A single stillness could be the loudest warning when sorrow visited. A quiet touch could carry the weight of mourning. This was a world where meaning moved like water, fluid, gentle, carving canyons not with force, but with patience. Some say the oldest languages are lost, but not all are gone. A mother humming to her child, a friend holding your gaze just long enough, a stranger's nod across a room. These are echoes of that older way, fragments of a time when speech was not yet divided from silence, when sound and gesture were the same. Breath, the other humans lived within this language. They did not invent it. They were it. Now imagine a morning in their world. Mist crawling low across the forest floor, the sky stained soft with the pale blue of approaching sun. A group gathers around embers, their faces still painted with the colors of dreams. One lifts a smooth stone, marked by scratches. He does not speak. Instead, he draws a circle in the dirt, then a line through the center, then points to the horizon. No sound, but everyone understands it is time to move. The hunt must begin before the warmth comes, before the prey hears their footsteps in the thawing ground. This is not guessing. This is shared memory. This is language without letters. And yet, they were also changing. Inside their minds, something new was forming, not just image, but structure. Not just sound, but story. They began to shape cries into signals, grunts into codes, repeating syllables, to mimic the world around them, the call of a bird, the rustle of leaves, the sharp clap of flint against flint. Little by little, sounds gathered gravity. A hum became a name. A hiss meant danger. A rhythm meant home. And still, no one had taught them. It happened slowly, like roots growing underground, unseen, but inevitable. Even now, if you close your eyes, you might still hear it. Not words, but feeling, the language. Beneath language, the voice of movement, the grammar of gesture, the pulse of thought. Before it splits into words, a breeze that brushes your cheek, a sound that calls up a memory you cannot name, the hush that falls just before something changes. These are your inheritance, passed not in books, but in bone. The other humans ruled in silence best. Their silence was full. They ruled with presence. Beko's presence said more than speech ever could. And when at last they began to speak, it was not to command, it was to share, to wonder, to remember. Their first words may not have been, "I want," or "This is mine." They may have been, "Look, here, come." And if that is true, then the first sound of language was not a claim, but an invitation. Not a claim, but an invitation. Now, in your stillness, let yourself return to that moment, before speech, before division. When all the world was connected by breath and gesture. Let your thoughts quiet. Let the hum of ancient voices rise, not in your ears, but in your heart. Breathe slowly, as if your breath is a story being told across 300,000 years, and as sleep draws near, know this: you are not the first to listen, and you will not be the last. The language is still here. You carry it, even in silence. In silence, there is something about fire, not just the warmth, not just the light, but the memory it carries, the way it dances, the way it listens. Long before cities, before temples or kings, there were circles of humans gathered around flames that flickered like thoughts. They sat not just for heat, but for stories. Stories spoken, yes, but also those held in eyes, in hands, rubbing old scars, in silence passed from elder to child. The other humans, they knew fire as a companion, a presence that hummed when the night grew too large. Picture it, the moon rising behind distant trees, the stars scattered like seeds across the black soil of sky, and a group huddled close. Their shadows stretching and shrinking, gas fire crackled between them. Someone draws a figure in the ash. Someone else throws a dry leaf, watching it curl into smoke. And another, older, quieter speaks. The voice is rough, but steady. It is not a performance, it is a remembering. Not of one day, but of all days, the migration of rivers. The fall of the great tree, the eyes they once saw in the darkness, which blinked and vanished. You see, to them, fire wasn't just a tool, it was a bridge, a way to connect the living and the dead, the seen and the unseen, the now and the always. When a body was laid to rest, it was fire that guided the soul. When a birth was celebrated, fire danced in honor. When someone was lost in the forest for too long, they left small fires along the paths, hoping they would be found. Fire was language. Fire was memory. Fire was the oldest witness. They learned from it, watched how it consumed and spared. Not everything burns the same. Some things resist, others vanish in an instant. From fire, they learned about hunger, about balance, about caution. They learned that warmth could invite, but also warn, that even something beautiful must be handled with care. And perhaps, most of all, they learned how to gather, because no one watches fire alone. Every flame reflected in a pair of eyes, every flicker a heartbeat shared. Around that flickering light, the tribe remembered who they were, not just hunters, not just gatherers, but carriers of wonder, builders of story. One day, someone dropped a carved stone into the coals, watched it crack, watched it bleed color, and from that, they painted the walls of caves. Another day, someone held a stick too long in the flame, then used it to draw a black line across the earth, a shadow made solid. This was not accident. It was curiosity, it was play, it was the beginning of creation. And as you rest now, as your breath slows, remember that fire is not gone. Not really, it's in the warmth behind your eyes. It's in the flicker of thought. It's in every light you carry with you. The fire they once knew still burns in the deep places of your mind. It calls you to remember, not what they said, but how they saw, how they felt, how they gathered and dreamed. Close your eyes now, let the soft glow return. Let it warm your chest, your hands, your spine. Let it carry you backward, not in time, but in feeling. There are embers in you, still, and they remember. Before the tongues we now speak, before alphabets, or even the notion of writing, there existed a deeper form of language, quiet, ancient, and strange. It wasn't written on stone, nor carved in bone. It lived in gestures, in the way a mother touched her child's brow, in the arc of a hand reaching toward a wounded deer, in the stillness shared when a stranger arrived, and no one moved. This language had no names, no grammar, no verbs to tie meaning into knots, and yet it spoke clearly to those who knew how to feel. It sang, imagine a group standing at the edge of a valley. The wind is rising, clouds gather low, threatening storm. One points to the sky, two fingers, not one a signal passed through generations. It means the storm will circle, not strike. It means we wait. It means listen. No one argues, no one shouts. Understanding blooms like moss soft, silent, unquestioned. A glance could speak of love, a tilt of the head could speak of doubt. A breath held a moment to long mint danger in the grass. We, the ones who came after, we think of words as truth, but they knew better. They knew that truth lies in silence, and silence has shape. Their language didn't fill space, it bent around it. When a child was born, no names were given. At first they waited, that they watched how the child moved, how it reached for the river, how it curled its toes when the stars rose. A name would come later, not chosen but revealed, not spoken but felt. Names were not labels, they were mirrors, gifts. The world gave to those who listened. There was a boy once, or maybe it was a girl, who spoke with the birds, not by mimicry, but by standing still, by learning the rhythm of wings, the silence between calls. One day, a crow landed on their shoulder just for a breath, and then was gone. From that day forward, they were known as Windies. Not because someone decided so, but because that moment had marked them. The name wasn't a sound, it was a memory carried by all who saw. We think intelligence lies in words, but they knew it lived in awareness too. Notice the bend of grass after a wolf passed, to feel the mood of the forest change with the coming dusk, to understand sorrow in the way someone stirred the embers, that this was their poetry, not spoken, but lived. And when they did speak, when sound finally entered the world, it was slow, measured, heavy with meaning. A single word might take a minute to say, not because it was long, but because it was sacred. They believed words had weight, that saying something out loud changed the shape of the world, so they used them gently. Now, as you rest in the hush of night, think not of grammar, think not of proper speech. Instead, listen to the silence, the way your body breathes, the rhythm in your chest, the pulse in your fingers. These are your original words. These are your original words. The language before thought, the voice of the ancient humans within you. You do not need to speak. You are already understood. Let that knowing carry you now past the limits of language, into the quiet of being, where nothing must be said for everything to be known. Sleep comes not with noise, but with stillness. Let it arrive, far from the oceans beyond the cracked riverbeds, and over the ridges now swallowed by time. There were once settlements, not made of concrete, not built with plans, but grown slowly like shells or nests out of need, out of memory, out of touch. Not cities as we know them, but clusters of presence, circles of life. Their homes were shaped by the curve of the wind, by the hollows in the stone. They never forced the earth to bend. They listened. They followed the shape of the land. Imagine a wide plain under a sky of deep ash blue. A single ring of stones marks the center. From it, paths spiral out, pressed softly by many feet, yet never dug. Around the circle sit dwellings made of sun-dried clay, reeds, and earth, their walls breathing warmth. These were not shelters. They were living things. Their walls cracked and healed. Their roofs shifted with the seasons. Each fire burned low at the heart of every home, not just for warmth, not just for light, but for memory. Ashes were never discarded. They were kept, mixed with the clay of the next hearth. So each fire held the ghost of the one before. In this way, fire became their thread, a way to stitch generations together, not in books, but in heat, in smoke, in the flicker that danced against their eyes. At night, stories unfolded in silence. A grandmother's hand moved across the air slow, graceful, and the children watched. A gesture meant lion, another meant river. Then came a sound, low and humming. Together, these were not just stories. They were remembrance. They were maps. They were warnings. A place where the roots run bitter. A cave where spirits do not rest. A trail that only opens in mist. Every tale was a survival guide, and yet, somehow, also a lullaby. Archaeologists might find the bones. They might mark out the pattern of the dwellings. They might catalogue the flints and the pigments. But they will never find the laughter. They will never feel how the air trembled when a child took their first step inside the circle. They will not smell the herbs placed above the doors for protection, or the sweet rot of fermented fruit. once shared during the full moon. What survives in stone is not the whole of it. They believed each place had a soul, not just the living, but the land itself, to stay in one spot. Too long was to disturb its rest, so even their cities, even their sacred circles, were made to be left behind. After 3 seasons, they would pack their stories, smear blessings on the walls with red ochre, and walk away. The site would be reclaimed by silence, and to the wind it was as if no one had ever lived there. But some cities remained longer, where water was sweet, where animals returned. There the bones grew deeper, tools passed from hand to hand, voices thickened, walls were painted not just with symbols but with dreams. We find traces of them today, but we forget they too had ancestors, that even those early cities stood on older ones, more fragile, more faded, each one whispering into the next. Close your eyes now, picture a city lit only by fire, no walls to divide, only circles to gather. Smell the clay, the smoke, the breath of many generations. There are no names for these places, but in the quiet of night, when your heart slows, when the hum of the modern world fades, perhaps their shadows return. Perhaps in your sleep you walk among them, and maybe they welcome you as one of their own. Deep within the ancient equatorial belt where trees once rose like green cathedrals, there lived those who spoke to shadows and listened to what the shadows said in return. This forest, now long gone or changed beyond memory, held no borders, no fences, no beginning, no end. It was not something to be crossed. It was a presence to be entered. The humans who made this forest their home did not build homes at all. They wove themselves into the branches. They slept in nests of braided vine. They wrapped their dwellings around trees, not within them. The ground that was sacred. The ground was for roots and spirits only. The sick or the mourning stepped on it often. Everyone else lived in the green above. Their feet grew strong from bark and bough. Their balance was legendary. Children walked narrow branches before they spoke full words, and they listened to the calls of birds. Yes, to the warning hisses of monkeys, to the crack of limb under too much weight, but mostly to echoes, because this forest had its own memory. In the stillness between the hours, the leaves would whisper names, not human names, not ones that we could spell, but sounds that held weight, sounds that meant things. A soft rustle might mean river ahead. A hush from the right could mean boar nearby. A sudden silence meant danger. To outsiders, the trees were noise. To them, the trees were language, and so they passed knowledge not by words, but by mimicry. A child would learn to copy the cough of a bird, the rustle of an animal's tail, the sound of rain striking banana leaves before it began to fall. These were not tricks, they were lifelines. Each family had its own forest code, a secret dialect of chirps, knocks, breaths, and stutters in the canopy. It was enough, more than enough. They hunted without chasing. They waited with patience older than the moon. If a creature was needed, they'd call it gently, not with laws, but with empathy. Some days they took nothing, only watched, only sat with the trees, and if you sat still long enough, the forest began to tell stories, not of humans, but of itself. There were legends of the tree that weeps when cut, of a bird that visits only the dying, of a moss-covered clearing where the sun never touches, and those who dream there see the faces of ancestors they never met. These were not just tales, They were maps of the spirit, rules of the unseen, and those who broke them disappeared silently, without struggle, as if the forest had swallowed them back into its breath. Today, we find almost nothing of them. The vines took their bones, the rain dissolved their tools, even their fires left. No ashdot, but sometimes rarely, carving appears, etched into a stone hidden in jungle soil, a spiral, a sequence of repeating dots, a crescent nestled within a wider ring. We do not understand them. Yet, some say when the jungle winds are just right, those old sounds return. Not bird, not monkey, not human, something in between. And perhaps, just perhaps, as we close our eyes tonight, we feel the branches swaying, we hear the low groan of bark, the flick of something darting through leaves, the hush of a voice that doesn't need language. Maybe we are still being watched, still being remembered, still being called back by a world that never truly left, beneath the stars that hung lower than they do now. There was a valley hidden between walls of black basalt, slick with the breath of ancient rains. Few dared enter it. Fewer still returned. But those who did spoke of a people who had mastered fire in ways we never did. They did not fear it. They did not tame it. They spoke to it. And the fire listened. These weren't fires built from sticks and sparks. They were not born from clumsy hands striking stone. There was no flint, no tinder. Just thought and breath and song. To witness it was to question what it meant to be human. A young one would sit, eyes closed, hands placed on the earth. The tribe would hum not a melody, but a resonance, and, slowly, in front of them, the soil would warm, the air would thicken, and then, a glow, a soft orange flicker rising not from wood, but from memory. Their elders claimed the fire already existed in the world. Hidden in folds of time, it was not created, only revealed to them. Fire was not destruction, it was memory made visible. A story wrapped in heat. It never spread unless asked. It never burned what shouldn't be burned. These fires had no smoke. They gave off a soft scent like wet stone and blooming myrrh. They pulsed like heartbeats. Sometimes they rose in circles around their dwellings, creating gentle borders, warm, living walls of flame that whispered through the night. Travelers who wandered too close would hear it, a rhythmic hush, almost like breathing. Some claimed the fire was alive. They never used it for war, never used it for show. It was not theirs to control, only to call and release. When an elder died, they would not be buried, they would not be burned. Instead, the fire would rise around them, slow, silent, patient. It would carry them away, not consuming the body, but folding it into light by morning. Nothing remained, not even ash. Only warmth in the ground where they once lay. We've tried to explain this with science. We've offered theories, gas pockets, phosphorescent molds, hallucinations under pressure. But there are stones in that valley, smooth, mirror-like, yet never shaped by hand, that still warm under moonlight. Touch them, and some say you feel a pulse, like a memory, waiting. A team once tried to take one. They wrapped it in cloth, loaded it onto metal sleds, but by dawn, the sled was melted. The stone was gone. No marks, no scorch, just silence, and footprints that led back toward the valley. Only one of them returned. He wouldn't speak for months. When he finally did, he whispered a single phrase. The fire knew my name. So tonight, as we lie beneath the hush of our own ceiling, with our modern lights humming softly above us, we might think about that forgotten flame, the kind that didn't need fuel, the kind that didn't need to be taught. A fire that understood, and perhaps still does, long before maps, before names, before even the first whisper of myth. There was a forest that listened, not with ears, not with leaves, but with memory. It stretched across what is now dust and stone, once a vast, breathing sea of green. Every trunk stood like a quiet sentinel, every root curled into the earth like a coiled ear, and every sound made within it was never lost. Not a single step, not a single step, not a single breath. The forest remembered it all. Those who lived at its edge, not quite human, not quite forgotten, believed the trees were alive in more ways than just bark and sap. They said the forest heard the intentions of your soul. It could tell if you approached in fear, or in hunger, or in song. The ones who understood it, the first walkers, would never speak upon entering. They would hum low, resonant tones, vibrating gently in the chest, and the forest would answer. Not in words, not even in echo, but in shifts, subtle rustles, light bending just so, a path revealed only to those who felt, not thought. They spoke of trees that grew in spirals, twisting into impossible shapes, as though dancing with time. Their bark shimmered faintly at dusk, like wet stone. Leaves the size of cloaks drifted in patterns too precise to be mere wind. But it wasn't beauty that made the forest sacred. It was memory. Step by step, the deeper you went, the more the forest remembered you. It began to carry your weight, soften your footfall. It knew your grief, your past, the shape of your sorrow, and gently, without judgment, it sang it back. Some called it madness, others called it communion. There were nights when those who dared to sleep beneath its boughs would dream of voices they'd never heard, voices from a time long buried beneath soil and silence. And sometimes those dreams left marks, symbols drawn in soft moss beneath sleeping hands, names that had never been spoken, yet felt familiar, a pressure in the chest, as though something old had stirred. When fire finally came, not the sacred kind, but the hungry, clawing fire of the new tribes, the forest did not burn in panic. It hummed, not in resistance, not in pain, but in mourning, a long, low vibration carried through the soil, until the fire flickered, slowed, and died. No ash, no smoke, silence, and then the forest vanished. Today, we search satellite images for strange tree rings. We dig up roots too old to carbon date. We find grooves in fossilized bark that look eerily like songlines, melodies preserved in wood, but no one remembers how to sing them. Still, some say, when you walk alone through untouched wilderness, far from power lines and trails, if you close your eyes and hum, just softly, just honestly, the air will shift. A branch might sway with no wind, a bird might fall silent, and in that moment, you'll feel it, the forest, listening. And somewhere, deep beneath the layers of time and forgetting, it might just hum back. There is a place so remote, not even time knew it was missing. A salt flat, so vast, so smooth, that when the skies bent low, the earth mirrored them perfectly, as if the ground had become sky. This was not a place of footsteps, not a place of shelter or war or tools. This was a place of watching, because long before we built towers to reach upward, there were those who believed the sky was not above, but below, beneath the skin of the world, hidden in reflection, they called themselves nothing. No names, no tribes, only gestures. A hand raised with 3 fingers extended, a palm placed flat on water without a ripple. They moved silently across shimmering plains, bodies painted in mirrored dust, not to be seen, but to vanish. They didn't hunt, they didn't build, they listened. Their entire life revolved around one belief: the sky was trying to speak, but its voice was not thunder, not wind, not stars. It was light, and its language was reflection. When light curved on the water, when clouds split and rejoined in their mirrored twins, when lightning cracked and danced along the horizon, they read these movements as one might read a sacred text. Each glint, a sentence, each shift, a revelation, and they answered, not with words, but with movement. They spun slowly in spirals across the reflective ground, arms reaching, hands slicing air in patterns only they understood. Every movement deliberate, every step an offering. Some called it dance, but to them it was conversation. Their rituals left no monuments, no bones, no carvings, no fires, only faint swirls pressed into layers of ancient sediment, circles too large to be coincidence, but too perfect to be natural. We almost missed them, and maybe we were supposed to, because their truth was not meant to be held. It was meant to be seen once, then lost again. When the floods came, slow rising, ancient floods, the salt plains dissolved, their mirrored world shattered into pieces, and with it, the ones who had spoken to the skies. Reflection vanished completely. No screams, no trace, only stillness, and the sky, once answered, was silent again. Yet, now and then, when the winds are soft and the ground catches a perfect reflection, travelers have claimed to see strange figures moving across the light, not casting shadows, but becoming one with them. No footprints, no sound, just a gentle spinning, as if the earth were remembering a forgotten language, spoken long before the world knew its name. Beneath the crust of what we now call Europe, in a jagged cathedral of ancient stone and silence, there once lived a people with eyes adjusted to darkness and minds lit by dreams. They were not tall, their limbs were wide and strong like tree roots, and their fingers, thick and clever, grasped the world not in conquest, but in reverence. We gave them a name much later, Neanderthals, but to themselves, they had no word for us and no word for them. Only gestures, only breath. Their caves were not just homes, they were memory chambers. Their walls whispered, with ochre handprints and patterns in ash and fat spirals, grids, and marks that spoke in a language no mouth could utter. Each mark was placed with care, not for beauty, but to remember. Not themselves, but something older than them, older than even time. They sang, but not in melody. Their songs were low vibrations, hums and rhythms that bounced off the cavern walls, turning stone into music. They used bone flutes, wind whistles made from hollowed feathers, and the drip of water from stalactitesto shape sound into something sacred. A child's laugh might echo for minutes. A single footstep might trigger a wave of tones that danced from wall to wall like fireflies. They believed sound was a kind of map, not of space, but of memory. Their dead were not discarded. They were placed in soft pits, surrounded by flowers, wild thyme, blue cornflowers, and something red that no longer grows. Their bones were painted, then sung to, not mourned, but guided. They believed that bones remembered warmth, and so, If you kept singing to them, they would never grow cold. We often speak of Neanderthals as if they were slow, brutish, lesser. What if they simply chose silence over noise? What if they saw Death Note as an end, but as a migration into a deeper cave, a darker tunnel where even thought could echo forever? One day, the mouths of their caves closed. The earth moved, ash fell, cold swept across the continent, and the songs ended. But inside certain caverns, when the winds hit just right, you can still hear a faint, almost imperceptible hum beneath the stalagmites. A hum that doesn't sound like wind or water or rock but like the echo of a forgotten people. Woe once sancto the teeth of the earth, in the shaded folds of the tropical forest, where heat hung heavy on the leaf sand, the rivers carved paths like liquid memory. There moved a tribe of humans so elusive, so distant from the world we now know, that their breath still lingers in our blood. They were small, barely reaching the shoulder of modern man. Their skulls, ancient, their bones, curved like questions, and their presence, a riddle wrapped in twilight. We call them Homo floresiensis, but long before names, they had stories etched into bark and stone, tales told by firelight and silence. They lived on an island, Flores, surrounded by waters that kept the world at bay, a place where time did not pass, it lingered. They hunted pygmy elephants, creatures no taller than a child, and when they found them fallen, caught in mud, or weakened by age, they did not rush. They sat, waited, watched, as if asking the earth for permission. Their tools were simple, but their choices were profound. They knew the force like the veins beneath their skin, and when the rains came, they did not hide, they listened. For them, each drop allures a message from the trees. For years, we thought they were gone, extinct, erased, but then a whisper emerged, not from the past, but from the present, in 2003. Deep in Langbua Cave, their bones were uncovered, intact, preserved like an echo waiting to be heard. Again, they were not broken, they were sleeping, and then something stranger. The forest tribes of Flores, those still living, spoke of small people, walked at night, not ghosts, not spirits, people, covered in hair, silent as shadows, seen, and then gone. They called them Ebugogo, the grandmothers, who murmured and stole food, who mimicked language, who knew the secret paths through the jonglaven birds could not follow. Were they myths? Perhaps. But myths are often memorious that forgot they were real. Some scientists smirked, others leaned in. What if they never left? What if beneath the roots, in the caves without names, in the spaces where light never touches, they still live, not as animals, not as monsters, but as another branch of us, pruned, yet breathing. You see, extinction isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a choice to step aside, to disappear, to leave the fire and walk into the dark beckers. The world was never truly theirs to begin with, and so perhaps tonight, as the forest hushes sand, the wind shifts through leaves like fingers across skin, there are eyes watching, old eyes, gentle eyes, waiting not for discovery but for silence, the kind of silensive always known far from the warmth of island jungles. Beyond the tangled roots of equatorial life, there rose a different kind of silence, cold, sharp, glacial, a silence shaped by snow, by wind, by the long breath of mountains, and in this frozen stillness, they thrived, the Denisovans, and the ghost people of the highlands. We barely knew they existed until a fragment, just a single knuckle, bone from a Siberian cave, revealed a forgotten lineage. It once danced with fire and frost alike. Not a skull, not a face, only a shard of what once lived. And yet, in that shard, a universe opened. They were human, but not like us. Not entirely. They shared ancestors with Neanderthals, and with us, but carved a different trail through the corridors of time. They settled where no one else dared. The Tibetan plateau, the roof of the world. Thin air, freezing nights, endless stone. But they adapted. Their blood thickened, their lungs stretched, and they became creatures of altitude and endurance. Even today, when climbers gasp for breath on Everest's slopes, they carry Denisovan genocide every oxygen-starved inhale, a gift from a people long going but never truly absent. No tools, no burial sites, no cave paintings to whisper what they believed, only their DNA hidden inside us, like a locked room. And when we opened that door, we found something unexpected. Melanesians, Australians, indigenous peoples from island Sacras, the Pacific, carry the fire of Denisovans in their veins. As if these ancient humes did not fade, they flowed into us. Imagine them now, high on a wind-lashed cliff, wrapped in fur, eyes scanning the white horizon for survival, but for meaning. Did they dream? Did they name the stars? Did they wonder why the cold summertimes felt like memory? Perhaps, perhaps not, but they endured. That, in itself, is sacred. Some say they interbred with us, that we mixed, merged, fused, but it was not conquest, it was kinship. It was kinship. In a world of danger and ice, we did not always compete. Sometimes we held hands, shared fire, shared language, shared children. And so when the Denisovans disappeared, they did not vanish. They echoed in our skin. They echoed in our skin, in our breath, in the way some of us still feel at Homo mountains. Every glacier, every ridge might still hold their bones, sleeping quietly, waiting to be found. But perhaps it is enough to know thee never truly left. They live inside the air we breathe when it's thin, inside the silency thought only altitude can teach, beneath the cold forests of what is now Central Europe, among tangled brambles and towering trees. Another flicker stirred in the dark, not a flame of fire, but of thought, a kind of mind, still not quite ours, still shaped by shadow and survival. But something was waking. The Neanderthals had already ruled for millennia, but around 300,000 years ago, a silent revolution began, not of weapons, but of symbols. It began not with a shout but a shape, a deliberate pattern carved into stone, a red line smeared across a cave wall, a set of bones arranged, carefully, purposefully, and suddenly, the world was no longer just a place to survive, it was something to understand. They began to bury their dead, not just abandon them to the wolves, but fold them into the earth as if the body mattered, as if the story didn't end with death. And in that burial, a question was born. Where did they go? That question, the most ancient question, did not belong to us alone. It may have begun with them. They made tools, yes, but their tools were not just functional. Some were beautiful, polished beyond utility. Carved with care. Why make something beautiful unless you feel something deeper? And their homes, not mere shelters but organized spaces. Fire at the center, stones around the edges, bones hung deliberately. This was not random. This was ritual. And then, the flutes. Deep inside a cave in Slovenia, a bear's femur was found, but pierced with perfect holes. Even now, scientists argue, was it made by them? But imagine a Neanderthal, in the glow of fire, raising that bone to their lips, and letting breath become music, just sound, but sound with intention, a lullaby, a call to gather, a song for the stars. We will never know. But in that hollow note, something unmistakable echoed, meaning, they once lived where we live, walked the same paths, drank from the same rivers, and when they saw the moon rise, they might have paused, not just to observe, but to wonder. That makes them more than cousins. That makes them kin, and so their extinction was not a failure. It was a transformation, because traces of their language might still hum in our throats, traces of their gestures in our hands, traces of their dreams in our sleep. They're not gone, they are folded into what we are. Not separate, not other, just earlier. The earth forgets slowly. You walk a mountain path, feel gravel beneath your boots, but 100 meters below, bones are sleeping, bones of another kind of human. A myth, not a legend, but someone with hands like yours, eyes like yours, and thoughts that once wandered as yours do now. They're not in museums, not all of them. Some remain buried in riverbeds, sealed inside caves, lost in deserts, swallowed by sandstorms, and every so often, one is uncovered, an old jaw, a shard of skull, a tool shaped by fingers now gone. We dust them gently, whispering questions into the air. Were you like us? Did you love? Did you love? You fear the dark? In Morocco, a skull was unearthed. It didn't belong to Homo sapiens, not exactly, but something just before. A cousin. The bones were old, very old, around 300,000 years, and the face, not so different. The brow a little heavier, the chin uncertain, but the eyes, the sockets, deep and human. Someone had lived behind them. They'd laughed, or cried, or stared into fire with questions that have no answers. Elsewhere, in the green highlands of the Philippines, a small foot was found, and then teeth, and a hand so tiny, a species no one had imagined before. Homo luzonensis, another human, different from us, and yet they carved tools, they climbed trees, they made choices. Now they're gone. But their bones whispered, we were here. It happens again and again. In Siberia, a finger bone. Just one, but enough to shake the world. From that fragment, we met the Denisovans, a people no one had ever seen, but whose DNA lives in the blood of millions today. Their songs are gone, but their blood is not. Their language has vanished, but something of them still moves through lungs, hearts, brains, still alive in you. Every mountain range, every forest, every field of wildflowers might be a grave, but not of sadness, a grave of memory, of lineage. And as we walk across the world, we walk not above the dead, but among our ancestors. They are not beneath us. They are not beneath us. They are part of us. This is the truth the bones tell. We are not the beginning. We are a continuation, a long, slow, sacred unfolding of what it means to be aware. They walked first. They wandered first. They made the first. Firesand told the first stories, hands pressed into cave walls, and though the walls have crumbled, the prints remain. There is something sacred in forgetting, not erasure, but surrender, a quiet knowing that not everything must be remembered have mattered, that even if the names are lost, the lives were real, The wind remembers, even when we do not. They had names once, those other humans. Soft syllables passed between lipses, fire crackled in the dark. Names shouted in joy, or whispered in grief, or sung over children cradled in bark-woven arms. None of those names remain, but the silence still holds them, and when the wind slips through ancient canyons, it does not howl, it speaks in the language of memory. Once, long ago, a woman stood at the edge of a cliff. Her world was smaller than yours, no maps, no countries, no gods etched into stone. But her mind was wide. She saw the stars, she saw death, she saw life. She might have carried her child on her back. She might have worried about rain. She might have looked at the moon and wondered what it was thinking. She may not have spoken as you do, but she understood. She ruled nothing. She owned no land, but in the eyes of her people, she may have been everything. In today's museums, we polish their bone sand, arrange them under lights. We label them Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo naled, archaic, primitive, extinct. But labels are not truth. They are only tools to try to separate them from us. Yet the difference is thinner than a breath. Their blood runs in our veins. Their fears hide in our shadows. Their instincts curl behind our thoughts. And sometimes, just sometimes, when you look into a stranger's eyes, you might feel something familiar. A flicker, an echo, a quiet memory that you cannot place. We dream of being alone at the top, the only humans left, but the truth is softer than pride. We are not alone in our history. We are a choir of forgotten voices. We are the harvest of all those who came before and disappeared. What a sound at night. When you lie still in the dark, listen. Not to the machines, not to the ticking clock, but deeper, beneath the world. There is a silence there, and in that silence, there are footsteps, stone tools striking flint, laughter around a fire, eyes lifted toward an unfamiliar sky. You are hearing your past. You are listening to your origins, and even if their names are gone, they are not lost. Because their breath became yours, their dreams became the world you now wake into. Here we are at the quiet edge of all knowing, past the carbon dates, past the bones in glass boxes, past every chart, artifact, and confident word from a lectern. What remains is wonder, not just curiosity, but reverence, because now we see what science alone could not teach. That the world was never waiting for us to arrive. It was already full of minds, of mothers and elders, of hands that shaped tools, of eyes that held fear, love, and firelight. The planet was alive with humans before we were ever called modern. They were many, they were diverse. Some dwelled in forests, others roamed across deserts. Some carved shelters in the sides of cliffs. Others danced near Riverstadt, no longer run. Their faces would seem strange to us, but not alien, no. Their smiles would still speak. Their grief would still ache. Their courage would still ache. Their courage would still move us, because they were not our missing links. They were not our failed cousins. They were not before us. They were us, written in different scripts. And so we ask, what does it mean to be the last ones standing? It is not victory, it is inheritance. And inheritance demands remembrance. They left us no monuments, no towering spires, no grand cities, but they left something greater. They left silence filled with meaning. They left seeds of thought, dreams unfinished, paths untaken, questions still forming. They left the ache of all that was almost. Now, as you sit in the stillness, take a breath, not just for yourself, but for them, for the woman whose footprints are fossilized beside her child's, for the man who carved stories into the tusk of a mammoth, but the child who learned to laugh. Stars no longer in the sky, breathe and you carry them. Close your eyes, and they rise behind them. They are not gone, not truly, because the blood remembers, and the bones remember, and the dreams we have tonight may be the same ones they once whispered beneath the flicker of ancient firelight. Sleep now, as they once did, with the sky watching, and the earth holding wean, the same cradle it held them. You are not the first, you are not the last, you are a continuation. You are a hymn still being sung. We were never alone, and we never will be.